Good evening, friends. Gord's Poetry Show. Welcome to number 14. There's been an unavoidable technical hiatus of late. Modems and routers and internet service providers and all the complications that can result from that network of relationships. I did pass the hair pulling stage 4 or 5 days ago, and still have hair, as you can see. It's still there. And tonight the problem seems to be interruptions in reception. This is attempt number 3 at Poetry Show 14. Cuts itself off in the middle and says, do try to reconnect. So, cheers to you all, and my dry throat. You see me now, having already read for 15 minutes. That massive Richard Brautigan biography that I was waving about at you a while back and referring to over and over. I'm now on page 532 of 900 plus pages, and fascinatingly detailed biography it is too, from his, I think, 1970 Rommel drives on deep into Egypt. Feasting and drinking went on far into the night. Feasting and drinking went on far into the night, but in the end we went home alone to console ourselves, which seems to be what so many things are all about, like the branches of a tree just after the wind stops blowing. Well, we certainly had a lot of wind here in the last week. This famous storm blowing things about. It's gone now, but not for the people in New Jersey, those poor unfortunates. And I do extend the olive branch of sympathy. We lucked out here in Canada, that's no question about that. Leonard Cohen, famous singer and songwriter, not so famous poet, lesser known novelist, despite Beautiful Losers having attained some kind of off in the corner iconic status, I think. The Book of Longing, containing poems from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. The Lovesick Monk. I shaved my head, I put on robes. I sleep in the corner of a cabin, 6,500 feet up a mountain. It's dismal here. The only thing I don't need is a comb. The party was over then too. When I was about 15, I followed a beautiful girl into the Communist Party of Canada. There were secret meetings and you got yelled at if you were a minute late. We studied the McCarran Act, passed by the Stooges in Washington, and the Padlock Law, passed by their lackeys in colonized Quebec. And they said nasty shit about my family and how we got our money. They wanted to overthrow the country that I loved and served as a Sea Scout. And even the good people who wanted to change things, they hated them too and called them social fascists. They had plans for criminals like my uncles and aunties, and they even had plans for my poor little mother, who had slipped out of Lithuania with 2 frozen apples and a bandana full of Monopoly money. They never let me get near the girl, and the girl never let me get near the girl. She became more and more beautiful until she married a lawyer and became a social fascist herself, and very likely a criminal too. But I admired the communists for their pig-headed devotion to something absolutely wrong. It was years before I found something comparable for myself. I joined a tiny band of steel-jawed zealots who consider themselves the Marines of the spiritual world. It's just a matter of time. We'll be landing this raft on the other shore. We'll be taking that beach on the other shore. First we take Manhattan. My mother asleep. Remembering my mother at a theater in Athens 35 years ago. A review by Theodoricus, those great songs. She fell asleep in the chair beside mine in the open-air theater. She had arrived that day from Montreal, and the play started close to midnight. And she slept through the mandolins and the climbing harmonies and the great songs. I was young. I hadn't had my children. I didn't know how far away your love could be. I didn't know how tired you could get. Tiredness is temporary. Much later, Ray Charles, You Singing You Win Again, in the sunlight 20 years ago. Ray Charles, the singer I would never be, and my young wife, the wife of my youth, smiling at me from an upstairs room in the old house. Ray Charles and Mary Ann, dear spirits of my Greek life, now in the sunshine of every new summer. Mary Ann coming down the steps, the woman of the house. Ray Charles speaking fiercely for our virgin humanity 20 years ago. And again, in this Hollywood summer, still companions of the heart, as I measure myself once more against the high, sweet standards of my youth. Ah, we were all so much older then, weren't we? Maureen Hynes and her lovely newish book, Marrow Willow, which has just fortuitously come my way. Let us open with Legacy. A quote here from Federico Garcia Lorca, a name not unknown to the Poetry Show. When the moon rises, moon of 100 equal faces, the silver coinage sobs in the pocket. Early on, my parents taught me to open my eyes wide at the first glimpse of a turquoise sea around a hairpin bend. To need the hug of stone buildings, narrow streets in old city centers, warrened barrios. To pick my way through the crowded path of a new language, widening it syllable by syllable. To catch a sudden drift of incense halfway up the cathedral tower. To wait for the pinprick of sweet in the midst of sour. a pomegranate seed on the tip of my tongue, to argue over the tiny blue threads in lap-filling maps, and to return home. Autumn nightfall in Granada, walking alone beside the river, up the Paso de los Triestes, the road to the old city cemetery, remembering them. What lessons did they intend? I asked the stone walls. Devotion and compliance, a horror of the red flag, reverence for tradition, worthiness of dipping 2 fingers into cool holy water, of lifting my eyes up 5 stories of gold retablos rising to the roof. So mixed, so much, but still the poverty of never knowing the muezzin's call floating in the valley, the mihrab's placement, and what the single star aligning itself below the sickle moon still claims for the Alhambra's architects. Thank you, Maureen. We'll be returning to this book, surely, and very soon. Another Canadian icon, shortly established thereafter Cohen's arrival, Maragret Atwood. Her latest book, sorry, not her latest book, it's probably 10 years old by now, Morning in the Burned House. It does actually say new poems here, even though I know the Door has been more recently released. But still, a fine book, full of Margaret's trademark sardonic attitude. Manet's Olympia. She reclines, more or less. Try that posture, it's hardly languor. Her right arm sharp angles. With her left she conceals her ambush. Shoes, but not stockings. Oh, sinister. The flower behind her ear is naturally not real, of a piece with the sofa's drapery. The windows, if any, are shut. This is indoor sin. Above the head of the clothed maid is an invisible voice balloon. Slut. But consider the body. Unfragile, defiant, the pale nipples staring you right in the bullseye. Consider also the black ribbon around the neck. What's under it? A fine thread line, a fine red thread line, where the head was taken off and glued back on? The body's on offer, but the neck's as far as it goes. This is no morsel. Put clothes on her and you'll have a school teacher, the kind with the brittle whip hand. There's someone else in this room, you, Monsieur Voyeur. As for that object of yours, she's seen those before, and better. I, the head, am the only subject of this picture. You, sir, are furniture. Get stuffed. A man looks at a beautiful woman who is trying to get him through a door. Him and his leg brace. Clumsy, hammered carapace of metal. Shrapnel on the outside of his body from a war he must have forgotten or never fought. Some spike on him is caught down there. She bends over and he looks at her graceful rump and thinks, rump, and then thinks, pear on a plate, and, on the underside, 2 apples. He can't believe he can be so trite, like some shoddy derivative painter, and so removed from her. Aren't those thighs? Isn't that hair? He opens the thighs, strokes the hair. Nothing stirs. He thinks harder. Tries vulva. A word like a part in a car motor. Something made of rubber, an oily valve that squeezes and turns itself inside out. No hope for it. Once he would have been able to smell her, the pungency of spring pond and soft onions, mixed with a coy deodorant. Eyelets and armpit, and beyond that the murmur of willows, leaves of sunlight weeds crushed under her. But now she has no such halo. She stands up and smiles at him, a smile so translucent he wrinkles in it, like the skin on steamed milk. He's nothing to her but luggage. She needs to haul from room to room, or a sick dog to be kind to. She says, "Shall we try again?" He thinks, I am angry. She takes his arm. He thinks, I will die soon. Cell. You thought that was depressing? Try this. No, look objectively. You have to admit the cancer cell is beautiful. If it were a flower, you'd say, how pretty, with its mauve center and pink petals. Or if a cover for a pulpy 30s sci-fi magazine, how striking. As an alien, a success, all purple eye and jelly tentacles and spines. Or are they gills, creeping around on granular Martian dirt red as the inside of the body, while its tender walls expand and burst. Its spores scatter elsewhere, take roots like money, drifting like a fiction or a miasma in and out of people's brains, digging themselves industriously in. The lab technician says, it has forgotten how to die. But why remember? All it wants is more amnesia, more life and more abundantly. To take more, to eat more, to replicate itself, to keep on doing those things forever. Such desires are not unknown. Look in the mirror. Well, I've often felt castigated by Ms. Atwood's poetic utterances. 30 years on, it's much the same. But once in a while, she redeems herself with a pure lyric, devoid of... devoid of what? Rhetoric. The moment. The moment when, after many years of hard work and a long voyage, you stand in the center of your room. House, half-acre, square mile, island, country, knowing at last how you got there, and say, I own this, is the same moment the trees unloose their soft arms from around you. The birds take back their language. The cliffs fissure and collapse. The air moves back from you like a wave, and you can't breathe. No, they whisper, you own nothing. You were a visitor, time after time, climbing the hill, planting the flag, proclaiming, we never belonged to you. You never found us. It was always the other way around. Another Canadian poet, been around as long as Atwood and Cohen, more or less. But having failed to write novels and sing songs, he's not as well known. But he is equally accomplished. Gary Geddes, from his fairly recent book, Swimming Ginger, which is, I might add, all about an ancient 12th century Chinese scroll, one of the most famous works of art, assumed to have been printed by Zhang Zuduan. It depicts in surprisingly realistic detail an ancient cityscape where peasants and hawkers, merchants and scholars, monks and mandarins contend in an urban labyrinth of streets, riverboats, bridges, and palanquins. And as the print is rather small, I shall get the better glasses. Obad. I spent the morning repairing loose tiles on my roof. Halfway up the ladder, I saw Mr. Y's eldest daughter drift past on a donkey. She stopped by the neighbor's gate to allow the animal a few mouthfuls of long grass. Her bright red bandana echoed the finely stitched embroidery covering her breast. As the donkey dined, the girl leaned into the garden's lush foliage, exposing a thigh. I climbed a step or two higher for a better view, though my feet were aching and my head felt dizzy. I did not try to explain when I awoke in my straw bed with a tile-sized blue bruise that I'd seen the eldest daughter emerge from the hibiscus, her head and arms bejeweled with butterflies, a silk scarf of slowly moving multicolored wings that lifted into the air as she moved. All this happened on an ordinary morning in June, without a flute accompaniment. A pickle! Preference? Sour, I'd guess. You look the type who takes his pleasures with a frown. Try one of these beauties. Vinegar and garlic. Pickled fresh, of course. Ah, see, you like it. Did I not tell you? Observe that man turning into the yamen. Hempen shoes, white silk gown, plum-colored girdle. A gentleman convicted once for murder. A young woman in his care, a concubine. Townspeople considered him a saint, a man who wouldn't harm a fly. What happened? They say she played him for a fool, seduced a colleague. I have my doubts. Bribery's more likely, information he could not afford broadcast. Politics, radical friends whose lives she put in danger. He was banished for years, took refuge in the mountains. Pardon granted, home again, he took up charity, fed the poor, arranged funerals. A fitting sideline for a murderer, you say. Your humor matches your taste in pickles. He rescued me, gave me several ounces of silver, crockery for my business. Time to close shop, schlep those barrels downtown. Thank Buddha for my ambiguous patron. Fate? Go figure. Nothing's as it looks in this sanguine city. Put away your purse. There's pickles on the house. To wine. Indeed. What does a clinic to cure hangovers say about the body politic? Lao Tzu did not address the problem. I tried the hermit's life, a meal a day and not exactly square. Miserable, cold, wind blowing up my kazoo. And not for me the bucolic life, up to my nuts in pig shit or bent low behind an ox's ass and plough. I took exams, thinking bureaucracy the answer. Within 6 months, I had ulcers, enemies. and the bitter aftertaste of power weakened my pulse. Drunk, holed up in town and dissolute, I reinvented myself as an artiste, a connoisseur of fine wines. High on the grape, I achieved a calling loftier than the hermit, more cultivated than the farmer, a cut or two more civil than the bureaucrat. Gan by. We'll be doing more from that later. And also his lovely book, reissued, The Terracotta Army. We'll get to that very soon. But I would love to get to Ron Padgett. Wonderful, amusing, witty Ron Padgett. The fine American poet of the last 30 years. From his book, You Never Know, Lullaby. Another little poem before I go to bed and there to sleep. A little poem to bid the world good night and lay me down to sleep, inside the warmth of being fast asleep. Then slow and slower, down into the deep, warm way we have of sinking to the far away, inside our body's self, inside our pillow head, inside our sleeping bed. Thank you, Ron. We'll be returning to that one also. Might even read the whole thing, it's so good. And so, friends, with success on the third attempt, I leave you. Bon voyage. Farewell. May the force be with you in all your poetic renderings and utterances, and even in your morning chats with the mailman.